I've talked about the government of Thay and how the Red Wizards operate. I've talked about the society of Thay and what the people are like and how it is living there. But now I want to talk about the land of Thay itself. What geographical features does it have? What is the weather like? And what does the overall land look like? First, let's discuss the weather. Thay is naturally warm and dry. The elevation of the plateau prevents moisture from the Sea of Fallen Stars from reaching it, meaning that it gets little precipitation. However, the Red Wizards maintain a network of spells that keep pleasant weather conditions all year. It's warm, but not unpleasantly so. It rains regularly enough to keep the croplands healthy and fertile, but only during the night so as not to disrupt people during the day. This does wreak havoc on the weather of their neighbor to the northwest, Thesk, but the Thayans do not concern themselves with the difficulties of their neighbors. Almost every day in Thay is a beautiful one, which contrasts the actual conditions of living there. The Thayan Plateau. Most of Thay exists on a plateau, a raised piece of land that is about 2,000 feet above sea level at the outer edges, and slopes up to 4,000 feet above sea level around Lake Thaylambar and the foothills of the Sunrise Mountains. It consists of, quote, broad rolling vistas broken by low mesas and chains of jagged rocks, end quote. Due to Red Wizards manipulating the weather, the plateau is a vast and fertile region containing plantations, orchards, and tree farms. It also houses the domains of Red Wizards and the villages that surround the numerous Thayan tax stations. Gnoll and human troops constantly patrol the area, keeping a sharp lookout for slaves and foreign travelers. Due to an elaborate shield of overlapping wards set up by Red Wizards, the entire Thayan Plateau is immune to scrying magic. This does make it difficult to find intruders and criminals, but they count on their patrols to do a good job of that. The First Escarpment. The cliffs that make up the western border of the Thayan Plateau is called the First Escarpment. It acts as a natural border and defense, and they range from 50 to 200 feet high. They are honeycombed with tunnels, barracks, and fortresses carved from the rock, and the edge of it is sprinkled with citadels. Garrisons of soldiers, mainly gnolls, keep watch at all invasion points. There are only a handful of major routes up the escarpment, and they are all well guarded. While the cliffs are only a couple hundred feet high at most, there are dozens of these tiers, like that of a wedding cake, spanning 10 to 15 miles. A small group of adventurers walking up the difficult paths and short scrambles that double back many times can take over a day or two. The Second Escarpment is another ring of cliffs rising to a second plateau where Thaymount resides. Access to the Second Escarpment is tightly controlled, and it is even more jagged and difficult to travel than the First Escarpment. The Surague Escarpment is another set of cliffs, this time between Thay and the Sunrise Mountains. It averages 6,000 feet in elevation and is much more broken and rugged than other escarpments, sometimes disappearing entirely for dozens of miles before reappearing. The land between the Surague Escarpment and the Sunrise Mountains is called the Surague. Streams from the mountains makes this area a tangled maze of gorges and canyonlands. It is minimally populated, with few Thayan forces stationed here beyond a handful of small fortresses. Although said to be rich with silver and copper deposits, mining expeditions are rarely fruitful due to the wild animals and hostile humanoids inhabiting the area. Several tribes of goblins and kobolds lurk in ravines and tunnel complexes throughout the Surague, with rumors of evil naga, lamia, chimeras, and worse. There's also a few ragged bands of escaped slaves that barely survive the harsh conditions here. The Sunrise Mountains, sometimes called the Sunset Mountains, and they mark the eastern end of Faerun proper, running from the center of Rashomon to beyond Thay's southern border. These mountains form Thay's eastern border and reach elevations of 15,000 feet. Virtually impassable to those on foot, save for the most skilled climbers who know where they're going, the mountains teem with dangerous animals and hostile humanoids. Goblin and kobold tribes live here, often sending scouts to the Thayan Plateau, and the deeper one goes into the mountain's caverns, the more dangerous the monsters get, including nagas, chimeras, Othachs, and bands of feral gnolls. Old Ramviran towers and strongholds lie buried under the snows of the high slopes, alongside ancient well-like fortresses of some even older forgotten people. Patrols along this edge of Thay are not as vigilant as those on the nation's other borders. The denizens of the mountains rarely descend the Surague Escarpment to attack, and the idea of an invading force coming through the mountains is preposterous. Border patrol here is considered one of the dullest and most miserable jobs a soldier can get, and they seldom lead to career advancement. Lake Thaylambar is a large inland lake situated in the center of Thay, spanning 80 miles across. It boasts rich fishing grounds, providing much of the country's seafood. However, the lake also harbors several dragon turtles, which are frequently blamed for the losses suffered by Thay's fishing fleets. Thayan nobles often embark on hunting expeditions to deal with these troublesome beasts. The lake remains cold throughout the year, even during the summer. In 2nd edition, Lake Thaylambar fed both the Thazarim and Thay rivers. However, this was retconned in 3rd edition, where the map was adjusted to show the Thazarim River originating in the Sunrise Mountains near Thazar Keep and flowing into the Sahuagin Sea. A new river, the River Surague, now flows from the Sunrise Mountains into Lake Thaylambar. I assume they did this because originally the Thazarim was somehow flowing up the cliffs of the Surague Escarpment, which doesn't make any sense. The Alamber Sea, also known as the Sahuagin Sea, is the body of water to the south of Thay, which connects to the Sea of Fallen Stars. It acts as the main trade avenue between Thay, Mulhorand, Unther, and Timanther, and contains the island of Eleor, which serves as the center of Thay's naval power. The river Eltar flows from Thaymount to Lake Thaylambar. It provides most of the water to the city of Eltar and creates the canals that divide its major districts. The river was created when the Red Wizards summoned the demon lord Eltab to aid them in their war for independence from Mulhorand. It broke open a piece of Thaymount and the river spilled out from it. The river Gauros flows down the Sunrise Mountains and joins the river Mulsantir and the Gorge of Gauros. It has little animal and plant life and is only minimally navigable. In the late 1300s DR, the Red Wizards planned many colonization and cultivation projects, but internal power struggles kept them from happening. The river Lapendrar, also known as the River of Sorrows, in memory of the miners and the Thayan and Aglarondan warriors who died during Halakar's invasion of Thay in 1260 DR. It flows down Thaymount, through the Tharch of Lapendrar, and into the Sea of Fallen Stars. Quote, "The Lapendrar itself is not navigable past the first escarpment, as a waterfall tumbles over the edge of the plateau of Thay, preventing passage. However, the gorge of the River of Sorrows is one of the broadest and most gentle ascents of the first escarpment, at least for travelers on foot. When Halakar of Aglaron led his ill-advised expedition into Thay a century ago, this was the route he chose." End quote. The River Sur. Acting as the northern border to Thesk, it begins in a spring on top of the first escarpment, where it is narrow and fast. As it flows, it becomes wide, shallow, and infested with disease-carrying insects as it flows past the Sur Marsh and finally into Lake Mulsantir. The River Thay, originating in Lake Thaylambar and ending in Lake Mulsantir, is the major artery of trade within the northern Tharshes, mainly due to the fact it is navigable its entire length. Travel between Surthay to Eltabar is common, and you can find numerous keelboats and barges towed by slave teams along the banks. Thayans patrol the river heavily, keeping watch for unauthorized travelers and the occasional raid by Skads and Lacedons that originate from the ruins of Delhumid. The area around the River Thay is a heavily populated, fertile plain supporting vast orchards of fruit trees more suited to cool weather, such as apples and cherries, as opposed to the citrus groves of the south. The River Thazarim forms the border between the Tharch of Pyarados and the Tharch of Thazalhar. As said previously, in 2nd edition it flowed up the Surague Escarpment, while in 3rd edition and onward it flows from the Sunrise Mountains into the Alamber Sea. The River Umber originates on Thaymount and flows down to Nethentir, where it feeds into Lake Umber. It holds little significance for Thay's economy, presumably because they do not trade with Aglaron. However, it plays an important role in Aglaron's defense. Now, there are a few other locations I would also like to cover, besides just the geography. I am going to do a couple of videos on the 11 Tharshes of Thay. However, there's a couple locations that don't fit in one specific Tharsh or the other, so I'm just going to throw it in at the end of this video. First up, we have the Thayan tax stations. The Thayan tax stations are small fortresses placed liberally throughout Thay at strategic points. They feature a tower and a defensible keep containing 30 to 50 gnoll or human soldiers, and most have small villages attached to them, providing smithies, wheelwrights, livery stables, inns, and caravan suppliers. Each tax station takes a fee from travelers for the upkeep of the road and maintenance of its garrison. It is common for ambitious civil servants to volunteer to manage tax stations to gain reputation from their their superiors. The Tharshian or Tharshianess of the local Tharsh maintains tax stations and sets their fees. Then we have the Red Wizard domains that dot the country of Thay. In addition to the mansions that the wealthy keep in the cities, many Red Wizards also keep towers or compounds throughout the countryside of the Thayan Plateau in order to keep tight control of the land around them. I don't have much information on their towers, but I'm sure you can imagine what your average wizard tower looks like, and I'm sure there's plenty of adventures with maps. In terms of the compounds, though, they comprise of an inner ring and an outer ring. The inner ring of these compounds will have the Red Wizard's mansion, a small but luxurious guest house to impress their guests, complete with hidden passageways in the walls where spies observe the guests through spy holes, and then a servant's quarters between the guest house and the mansion, so that if the guests were to attack the mansion, the wizard would be warned by the screaming of servants. They would also have a spellcasting chamber to practice spells and perfect new ones, which is basically a warehouse surrounded by rings of raised earthen walls to absorb errant spells. For security reasons, the Red Wizards never kept slaves here in the inner compound, and instead hired middle-class servants to serve them. The outer ring would have granaries, stables, warehouses, and if they wanted to keep slaves, slaves' quarters, but they would make sure they stayed in the outer ring. The compound is obviously garrisoned with guards, and the outer walls are filled with dozens of zombies to open and close the gates, but also to be released or dropped from hatches in order to fall on intruders and create an undead wall that fills the gap if the gates are ever opened. Then we have the High Road and the Eastern Way, which are the major trade routes in Thay. The High Road, sometimes called the Slave Way for the large number of slaves that are driven north along it to the markets in Eltar, runs north-south from Bezentur through Tyraturos and ending in Eltar. Many Outlanders travel this route, so there are plenty of inns and taverns catering to foreigners along it, as well as spies and agents of the Red Wizards. The Eastern Way runs east-west from Nethjet to Paiadados, also going through Tyraturos. Quote, "These two main arteries of travel in southern Thay were originally constructed by the god kings of Mulheron. Elevated several feet above the ground and covered with sturdy alchemical tar, the roads are carefully maintained by the Red Wizards, who constantly send out teams of slaves to repair and resurface them. Tax stations and their attendant villages lie at regular intervals along the roads, and patrols of humans and gnolls are a constant sight to travelers and merchant caravans." End quote. Now that quote does say that slaves maintain the roads, and they did in the 1300s DR, but as of 1492, the road maintenance would most likely be done by zombies and skeletons as opposed to living slaves. And that is the geography and a couple additional locations of Thay. Stay tuned for my next couple of videos, which will cover the 11 Tharshes of Thay. Those should be out pretty soon. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to subscribe for more D&D lore.